So, Nicole,
Mhm.
you often use a client-centered approach. You
Mm.
emphasize that plus a trauma-informed approach. How do you tailor therapy to each individual's needs?
Yeah. So when I think of a client centered approach, I think about positioning the client as the expert of their lived experience
Mm,
and tailoring therapy to individual needs is a collaborative process.
mm.
And it unfolds over the first few sessions as the therapeutic relationship develops. And in that span of time, I pay attention to things like the ebb and flow of information,
Mm.
the verbal and nonverbal cues, and I look for ways to gauge the internal and external safety, what that looks like for the client. And one of the things that's really important in being client centered is respecting a, respecting their pace.
Mm.
So oftentimes, rather than assuming that a client is ready to talk about something specifically, it's being more curious. And oftentimes, I will suggest that we have a safe word, something like, pause or pass or stop, so that the client is fully in control of what they share and what content they engage with. The other thing with being trauma informed that is something that took some time for me to tune into is noticing the sensory preferences of clients. So things like lighting and certain smells and even the tone of my voice. So interestingly enough, it's been reported that some clients who've been through various types of trauma actually feel quite triggered with an overly empathetic tone of voice. And
Really?
yeah, and they actually prefer a more direct and matter of fact way of addressing different concepts.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so, because being trauma informed means noticing certain things that could be triggering, and sensory is definitely a big part of
That makes so much sense, but I have never heard anyone articulate that way.
Mm.
That's brilliant. And with the safe word, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because sometimes even on a side note, you can do it in relationship too, with my marriage. Sometimes it's like, Let's just pause this," or "I pass tonight," or something like it's transferable, we'll say.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Even, just I think about in relationships, no conflict after, like 10 p.m. Just
Yeah.
just avoid. Yeah.
That's a good time to say, "Let's just pause."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so with eclectic modalities, you integrate a variety of therapeutic modalities. Can you share how you determine which approach best fits a client?
Mhm. Absolutely. So, tailoring an intervention to a specific client involves multiple factors that requires a balance of intuition and experimentation. So, as I feel led to try a specific intervention, I always check in with the client.
Mm,
First, explaining what the technique is, and then trying it out to see if it fits. Understanding fit requires that I notice how a client is responding verbally, but also non-verbally, and approaching it with curiosity. So, for example, if I were to ask a somatic orientated question, such as, did you notice any sensations in your body
mm,
when you set that boundary?
mm,
And if I notice that the client responds, negatively to being asked about their bodily sensations, I just remain curious and open hearted as we explore their reaction. But ultimately, if a client is drawn toward a specific technique, and drawn away from another, that's important information for me to attend to so that I can meet the client where they are.
That makes so much sense. It
Mhm.
sounds like curiosity really governs a lot of your practice, Nicole.
Yeah, it's insightful that you picked up on that because often in time I find myself in session having thoughts that come to me. Even I attend to my own bodily sensations when I'm hearing clients express their stories. And I often say out loud, I don't want to assume my mind is going to a certain place, but tell me what's going on for you. And sometimes what they explain matches what came up for me. And
Mm,
other times what they explain is completely different. And I'm so glad that I didn't assume anything.
mm,
Yeah.
that's amazing. They're lucky to
Oh,
have you.
thank
I'm
you.
sure they'll probably cut that last piece of me saying that, but I wanted to that's
Oh.
really cool. And what you said about the somatic piece, about when you set that boundary, did you feel that in your body? I
Mhm.
thought that's very interesting because I think many people can relate to that, but maybe we haven't been paying attention. We're not aware of exactly, oh, yeah, I did feel that. Or, oh, yeah, my stomach did kind of turn, or, you know, felt a little tense. I think that happens actually so often, but how often do we bring our attention to it? I think that's really, really cool that you are so attentive to that.
Mm. It's interesting because, I think we're just taught and socialized, well, not everybody, but a lot of us, to do more top-down processing, right? Where we're in our heads. It's all cognitive.
Yes.
And, we sort of bypass our sensations and push through. But we do so at a cost. And as we move through life, our mind and body are connected and are logging our experiences in that connected way. So, approaching any type of emotional processing or traumatic processing must include this, what we call bottom up processing, where we are tuning into that felt sense, which is the body, mind body connection.
100%.
Yeah.
Articulated that so well, Nicole. I have been taught that from different doctors and physicians, but the way that you explained that is the best. That was so easy to understand and so easy for me to be like, that's exactly what they meant, top down versus the bottom up. So cool. I'm learning so much. This is amazing. Okay. Well, it's kind of, I guess this question is a little bit related to what we just talked about. So I'll just jump into this one.
Yeah.
Many of the therapies you use, like internal family systems and somatic therapy, which you kind of just touched on,
Mm.
focus on deep inner work.
Yeah.
How do you help clients navigate that process in a safe way for them? I know you kind of touched a little bit on that before, but
Mhm.
generally, especially with IFS and somatics. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, approaching deep inner healing work and healing work on any level requires what we call internal safety. And that is accomplished through nervous system regulation. So the way that I often start the conversation with clients is I share information about polyvagal theory and the protective nature of our nervous system. And so I explain how when a stressful or activating event occurs, our nervous system can imprint that experience. And I always use the metaphor of our cell phones taking a snapshot, taking a
Mhm.
picture snapshot.
Mhm.
S- It reminds me of what the nervous system does when it imprints an experience. And it does so using all of our five senses. So certain smells and sounds and bodily sensations. And then that imprint gets stored in a part of our brain called the amygdala. And I liken the amygdala to a type of database where these imprints get stored. And then through a process that's automatic called neuroception, our system then constantly scans the environment for any type of similarities that would match any of those stored imprints. And when it then detects a threat, and the amygdala mobilizes and summons the body's resources and energy for the purpose of defending that threat. So it will choose to go in various different modes. Maybe it will choose fight or flight, freeze, fawn, or there's something called dorsal vagal, which can look like disassociation. And it does all of these things because it wants to protect us. It wants to protect us from ever experiencing anything like those stored imprints that we have. So when working on healing, what becomes paramount is disarming that threat detection system. And we do so by nervous system regulation strategies. So various different things, such as bilateral tapping, can be done. And this has been shown to not deactivate, but decrease the stimulation of the activation of the amygdala so that it's not so on the offense in terms of defending. There's also a somatic hug. So hugging like this can increase oxytocin, which is that love and bonding hormone, and decrease that stress hormone of cortisol. And then there's tons of different strategies, but one of my favorites, and there's lots of research now to back that acts of self-compassion can be very regulating to the system. And it's so interesting to me that when I talk or I introduce self-compassion with clients, it's more a trend that it's not something they feel comfortable with. It's not something necessarily that they've practiced. And so how I introduce it is saying, well, imagine how you would show compassion to a loved one who is facing a similar situation as you. And then they're able to embrace, okay, so that's how I am to treat myself, which then creates that internal safety and regulation.
Wow, there's a lot of strategies there, Nicole.
Yeah, and there's so much more, but
Yes, but even of those, wow. Yeah. With polyvagal theory, I think that's something that is becoming more talked about and more discussed. If there is something that you wished people understood about polyvagal theory, just somebody who maybe just heard about it for the first time, what would that be?
Yeah. Well, what I love, I could go, it's hard to pick one thing, but here's how I love to envision it.
Okay.
So we talked about that mind-body connection. Well, that is facilitated through the vagus nerve. And so the mind and body are always communicating. And there's this bidirectional energy of, okay, this is where we want to put energy for this, and this is where we want to allocate resources for that. But then when the amygdala detects that threat, there's that communication of, okay, we need to allocate all of the body's resources to defending a threat. And I think the design behind it is quite beautiful because our bodies, without even our control, are always prioritizing keeping us safe, which is actually pretty beautiful if you think about it.
No, 100%, Nicole. And as somebody who has wrestled with chronic illness for a long time, I learned very early on that regulating your nervous system and healing that, it governs every other system in your body. So if you can learn the signals that your body is giving you, pay attention to what's happening with your nervous system. And for me, polyvagal has been incredibly helpful and eye-opening, especially the dorsal vagal side of things. because you can get stuck in that. People can get stuck in it for years, and it's very difficult to get out of it. It's not like you can take a supplement or anything like that. You almost have to kind of rewire your brain in some sense. And like you said, flood it with compassion and safety. And so hearing what you're saying about how you have to start with kind of that internal safety, so profound. And I don't know many people that start with that. And
Mm,
that's pretty cool.
I'm glad you could resonate with that.
Yes, I definitely. So the next question I want to ask is, mindfulness is a part of several of your approaches. How do you incorporate mindfulness into sessions, and how do you find it benefits your clients?
Absolutely. So, at the core of mindfulness is this act of noticing, right? Without attaching meaning, whether it be good or bad. And I find that mindfulness can be woven into many different therapeutic interventions because it holds the potential to decrease the energetic charge or activation of a particular thought, feeling, or sensation.
Mm,
So I think when I think of this, I think of this example. So say I were to make plans with a friend whose tendency is to show up late.
mm,
So as the time for our meetup approaches, I feel a pit in my stomach and I have racing thoughts about what I might do or say if my friend is late again. If I continue to focus on my anxiety about my friend being late, my energy flows toward increasing my anxiety.
mm,
But if I interrupt that cycle with mindfulness and instead notice that I have a pit in my stomach and notice that I have anxiety without attaching meaning to them, I free up space and energy to respond more calmly and use the skill of reassurance as a strategy to remind myself that I actually have lots of options available to me if my friend does show up late again.
mm.
And so essentially, mindfulness can help interrupt that flow of energy and create some space for a more softer, less activated response.
That makes complete sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Especially the assigning no meaning or judgment to the experience. I think that is key, and that's hard to do. I think that might be a learned skill.
Absolutely. And I, it's interesting because, if I'm thinking about that specific situation, if I were put myself into it, it's almost as though the more I think about my friend being late, the more upset I get.
Mm,
And and then I get mad. And then I would get mad at myself. Why am I
mm,
being this or why? And again, it's that flow of energy toward just being more activated. So it's that, and you're right when you say it's a skill because oh, I have a pit in my stomach. End of story.
mm,
Oh, I've got anxiety. Mm, okay. And that's where we introduce regulation to
mm,
create that space for that softer response.
mm. Yeah, that
Mhm.
makes sense. That's really
Mhm.
cool. Okay, do we feel ready to move on to the next?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
5. We're halfway there.
Yeah. You're doing so good. You see, I'm going to try and read it first, and then I don't have to look at it. Okay. All right. So you are very passionate about helping people align with their truest self. What does this transformation look like in practice?
Yeah. So when I think about the truest version of ourselves, I I'm of the opinion and I believe that it can be uncovered in exploring how we make meaning from our experiences and is connected also to our core values. So when I'm supporting clients with accessing their truest selves, their best selves, alignment, I help them with this journey of self discovery. And so there's this curiosity again of asking questions like, well, what's your why? What gives your life meaning? What, what dictates how you structure your day, your month, your year? Who is your role model and or mentor and why? If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be and why? So alignment with our truest selves is not something that I can impart or give a client, but rather a process that I help facilitate that requires them being radically honest and wholeheartedly committed to aligning with purpose, which is found in our true selves.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about some of the questions that you asked. Each one is so insightful. I'm wondering for people that don't know what lights them up, for people
Mm,
that still like they struggle with that, they haven't given time to think about that. What would you do? Like, what would your follow up be with that?
yeah. Well, I think it depends on the client, but where my mind went just immediately was, accessing our imagination. I can't remember who said it, but there was a quote somewhere where it stated that if you cannot use your imagination, it'll be really hard to access healing, which I think is pretty profound,
Yes.
right? And so where I went with that is getting a client to imagine what it would be like to feel lit up.
Mm.
And then getting curious, what are you noticing in your body? Do any scenes or feelings or thoughts come to your imagination?
Mm.
And just kind of pull at that thread of, oh, well, if I were to imagine what would light me up, this is what it would look like. And that's then forms a narrative that we can build from.
I can see how that would be really impactful to have somebody else on the outside of you kind of to be considered this to bring you
Mhm.
to that place of understanding about who you are. That's very insightful.
Yeah. And sometimes there can be barriers, right? Relates to a trauma imprint. And that's where then our focus goes. And that gets processed and that frees up space to imagine,
Mm.
oh, well, what is my truth? What does that even look like? What does that feel like?
Yeah, that makes sense. How does the experience of complex trauma typically show up in our adult lives? And when should someone seek supportive therapy to help resolve it?
Yeah. So complex or prolonged trauma can result in this overactivated threat response. So it's almost as though the system is power is turned up to 10 out of 10,
Mm.
meaning that the amygdala has prioritized the body's resources for defending against threats, but at a cost to other systems like digestion or immune function.
Mm.
What can happen is that the system begins to burn out and manifest as symptoms like emotional dysregulation or physical symptoms like IBS. The idea is that the mind and body have contained these stored imprints and held bodily sensations associated with the trauma for so long without discharging that stored up energy and processing. And so a feeling of dis-ease
Mm.
overcomes the body, the mind. And so what I would when I would urge someone to seek therapy is if they notice that there's a discrepancy between the way that they're showing up in life
Mm.
and the way that they actually want to show up in life.
That is a very simple and clear way
Mm.
to say that. That's such a good way to articulate that, and I will definitely keep that in mind for when I refer
Mm.
people to therapy. That's such a good way to articulate that, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes you're right because we have to keep it. I think sometimes people may get deterred to go to therapy for lots of reasons, but maybe they think it might be complicated or,
Mm,
you know, yeah, it feels like too much, right? And so keeping things really simple can be such a relief to
mm,
somebody who's just been chronically stressed, right?
absolutely. Because when you've been chronically stressed and you're in burnout, anything extra
Mm.
feels like so much extra, right? It just feels impossible to commit to, even if it's just an hour a week or something like that, right? It just feels absolutely overwhelming.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Oof. I have many feelings about this one because I have some friends that are stuck in this and it's really hard to watch. So, okay, so I think both you and we know people that have struggled with victim mentalities. I'm sure those people that are self aware, I think everyone probably can relate to times in their life where they have been pulled into that victim mentality. And it can be such a pervasive thought cycle that holds people back from experiencing the best in their life.
Yes.
How would you support a client kind of experiencing that cycle of a victim mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about supporting a client with a victim mentality, I think about holding space and compassion for them and approaching them with empathy, but also curiosity. And I just, I want to shake up the term victim mentality and maybe reframe it as a threat mentality. And
Mm,
I'll explain why.
okay.
So, our nervous system, as we've talked about, is always prioritizing safety and deprioritizing potential threats, even if these threats are positive, life changing things. So, all of us are living the lives that our nervous system has capacity for.
Mm,
This is where the idea of self sabotage comes in because stepping into a fuller life requires more from us.
mm,
It requires risk taking. It can require exposing vulnerable parts. And if the nervous system has not experienced these states in safety or regulation, it will absolutely prioritize comfort and familiarity. Also, these stored imprints do not track in real time. So, when there is a triggering event in the here and now, often the response is based on an original event in the past. So, I'll use an example here. Say, for instance, a person is turned down after a job interview,
mm,
and their system picks up that similar feeling of being rejected and it tracks it back to the original event of that person's father leaving them. Because the nervous system doesn't track time, it's responding to that feeling of rejection in the same intensity, whether it be thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, as the actual original event.
mhm,
And so on the outside, a person responding to not getting a job in that intensity can appear to look like victim mentality, but I would suggest that it's more likely a trauma response.
that makes complete sense. That's
Mhm.
the case for someone you're working with somebody and they're experiencing that. What would you do? What would your next step be?
That's where my next step would be sort of backtracking, right? It's okay, noticing that internal safety is going to be priority because if they're responding to the here and now as if through the lens of the past, we absolutely need to prioritize internal safety, nervous system regulation, and then adding steps to it. So once they're really well versed with, okay, so when I'm in a stress response, I go into freeze.
Mm.
But then say they're able to, well, how do you know you're in freeze? Well, I know that I'm in freeze because I have these body sensations and I have these thoughts. My brain is telling me, perhaps, you know, the brain is trying to make them think that they're under threat in some way. Say somebody is, their neighbors are being loud and that screaming reminds them of something traumatic in the past. So their brain is trying to tell them, be careful. People are screaming. I need to now put you in a freeze response.
Mm.
I would encourage them to do is notice, okay, so that's how the narrative of my brain and my system is protecting me. So what can I do to reassure my system that I am in the here and now and that I'm actually not under threat, and reassure the system using regulation and also a new narrative
Mm.
and building up experiences of safety will deactivate, will lessen, we'll say lessen over time and over accumulation of safe experiences, that threat response. And therefore, the person can now be more present to the here and now.
Right. And not be pulled back to, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you are passionate, Nicole, about working with adolescents and adults. How does a client's kind of life stage and I would just say age impact how you support them in their healing journey?
Mm. Yeah. So the cool thing about being client centered is I just immerse myself in the vantage point and worldview of the client in front of me. So if it's an adolescent, I just become more aware of how I use language to convey my points.
Mm.
And I am experiential in my approach, supporting them in ways that would relate to their experience.
Mm.
Knowing that an adolescent will make meaning from their experiences differently than adult because of where they're anchored in their development and social context.
Mm.
Whereas with adults, I can pull from a wider range of life experience or wider range of contexts given their extended life experience. And this can result in flexibility in what therapeutic techniques and approaches we try out based on, the adult's personality, their presenting problems, perhaps their history. But ultimately, when I think about client engagement with someone at any age, I think what's most important is attuning to their emotional state and creating that meaningful connection.
So there has been a vast increase in research on the transitional phases of life for women, specifically perinatal, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. And how can these transitional phases affect women's mental health? And how can counseling support them through these transitions?
Yeah. Yeah. So, stages of life can elicit a range of emotions for women, whether it be during or after pregnancy, perimenopause, or menopause, because significant changes occur systemically in the mind and body, meaning a woman is holistically affected by any one of these transitional phases, which can then impact her identity and the relationship that she has with herself. And so, how counseling can be of support is helping her to explore the grief and loss that comes with transitioning from one phase to another, helping her navigate the emotional landscape of this new phase. Perhaps there's, emotions that are experienced at an intensity she's never experienced before, and helping her to navigate That, as well as feelings of anxiety or depression, which can also be prevalent during these transitional phases. I think also what's really important is validating, providing a space where she feels validated for her experience. Because I think, and I don't want to make an assumption here, but, you know, sometimes we can kind of muscle through these things in the moment out of, we just need to put our heads down and do it. And then have sort of this delayed reaction of, oh my gosh, that just happened. And now I feel all the things. And yet there may not be space in in their lives by partners or family where they feel validated for their experiences. I also think giving support for that transition in their identity. What does this mean for my identity now? And, helping them renew a relationship with themselves with this new phase of life. One of the things that I love, love, love about transitional work is helping clients construct meaning from their struggle, make meaning out of, what they're going through, and help them to reauthor a narrative that is empowering. Because even with the struggle, there's there there's also a sense of empowerment in that I just I am surviving this. This is what I'm enduring. And being strength based in creating this narrative that can serve as an anchor to lean on those harder days.
I think how you talked about our identity being the piece that really gets hit the most, and then needing validation outside of us, I think that's so huge. And I don't know about you, but I feel very grateful to live in this time and age where more time, money, energy is being spent on women's health in general. And I think I look forward to, in the 5 to 10 years, what we will know even more when it comes to women's physical health during all of those stages, and then mental health, the things that are in the brain, what's impacted through those phases. I think it will be enlightening, and I'm so glad that this conversation is starting. It feels a little bit sad that in 2025 it's kind of just starting to become something, when so many women before us have kind of, I think, sometimes wrestled and struggled in private. And now it's becoming a more publicly discussed conversation. And if this is too personal, Nicole, you don't have to answer this, but as a mom, you've gone through some of those transitional, life phases yourself.
Mhm.
What would you say was the biggest, or what impacted your mental health the most? Positively and or negatively, whichever you feel.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting when I look back, because we had struggles with infertility, and so we got fertility assistance for our first daughter. And so it's one of those, I once I actually got pregnant, I was so preoccupied with the miracle of being, pregnant, that I didn't even consider what life would look like after, or how, not what life would look like, but how I would feel,
Mm.
how life would look like for me after she was born. And I experienced definite postpartum depression, and I didn't even know that I had it until I went to my midwife and they did this screening that they do with everybody. And she said, Nicole, are you okay? Because you're very severely scoring for postpartum depression. In fact, I think you should go to the hospital.
Wow.
At the time, I thought, what are you talking about? I just, it's interesting as I reflect back that I just wasn't even aware because of all of the demands that are placed on us at that time, and going and going. But it wasn't until, a year and a half later, when I started feeling normal again, And I thought, oh,
Yeah,
totally. Okay. All
right.
right. Yeah. So I was totally depressed.
Mm.
But at the time, it wasn't really normalized. There wasn't a lot of resource. It was just take a medication.
Right.
And that wasn't really, it didn't align with what I wanted. So now I'm able to go and talk about it. That's the cool thing is
Mm.
that it's never too late to go back and talk about our experiences
Mm.
and process them and heal from them,
Mm.
right? It's never too late.
That's profound, Nicole. That is, yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable. I think that will connect with a lot of people. But also, what you said about it's never too late to go back. I'm thinking about my friends that are having kids right now. I have one in particular, and her mother made a comment of like, "Oh, your birth was so traumatic, haha." But she's like, "It probably still impacts me, but enough time has gone by." And we were talking about it. The next step is probably you're going to be a grandmother. It's never too late for you to go back and heal those things if you never feel like they fully healed or resolved. So I think that's very impactful that you said that. Kind of an open invitation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of like we talk about with repair. So if we, are in conflict and we want to repair, I mean, repairing, yeah, there can be a window, but even if we've missed that window, it's still worth going back and
Right.
repairing and attempting to repair, right? It's like therapy is very much a relationship. It enhances the relationship we have with ourselves. So in many ways, it's an act of repair on behalf of ourselves.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is our jumping off point for every other relationship that we have. So, okay. If you could share a message with somebody who is struggling and hasn't yet asked for help, what would that be?
I thought about this for a long time and I wrote a lot of things. And then I settled on one sentence.
Okay.
And that is, you are worthy of healing. So much power in that, isn't there?
So much. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you
Mhm.
are worthy of healing.